Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I do apologize if there's like a bit of a red cast on my face. I'm trying to get it so that doesn't happen, but like the way the light is in this room today is just being very weird, and the carpet in here is red and it's like bouncing back on my face. So if you see that, that is why. Anyways, we are here today because I finally read a Nick Cutter novel. This is The Queen. This is his latest release. If you've been on my channel for a while, you've probably seen my video literally titled, Why I Won't Read Nick Cutter. And for the long and short of it, it is because Nick Cutter is very well known in the horror community for featuring extensive scenes of animal cruelty in his stories. And that's just something that I don't like reading, which is why I haven't picked up novels like The Troop or The Deep, which are probably his two best known works. And I know that The Handyman Method, which is his novel that he wrote prior to this, also featured some of that, and I did receive it in Nightworm, and I very quickly decluttered it because I just don't want to read that. So when I got this in my most recent Nightworms package, I asked around to find out if there was any animal cruelty in it, and there wasn't. So I was like, you know what, alright, here is my chance to finally read Nick Cutter, because I've been saying so many negative things about him on my channel over the last couple of years, and I know nothing about him as a writer beyond the fact that he uses animal cruelty kind of as a crutch to write about extreme topics. And again, that's something I don't like, but I also don't think it's fair to continue to have a negative opinion of him without ever actually reading his work. So I'm going to read the inside flap of this book for you guys. One sunny morning in June, Margaret Carpenter wakes up to find a new iPhone on her doorstep. She switches it on and is greeted by a text from her best friend, Charity Atwater. The problem is, Charity's been missing for over a month. Most people in town, even the police, think she's dead. Margaret and Charity have been lifelong friends. They share everything, know the most intimate details about each other, except for the destructive secret hidden from them both. A secret that will trigger a chain of events ending in tragedy, bloodshed, and death. And now Charity wants Margaret to know her story, the real story. In a narrative that takes place over one feverish day, Margaret follows a series of increasingly disquieting breadcrumbs as she forges deeper into the mystery of her best friend, a person she never truly knew at all. I went into this book expecting to be blown away. So many people love Nick Cutter. He is known very much to write on the more extreme side of things. I don't know if I would consider him an extreme horror author, but he definitely has those extreme sides. And he definitely focuses on a lot of body horror and a lot of gross out horror, which are definitely very, 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 very much rooted in this novel. I'm definitely going to have spoilers at the end half of this video, but I'm going to do kind of like a quick overall review of it first. But yes, I went into this thinking I was going to be blown away, really wanting to like love his writing style and see why so many people are okay reading about some really depraved scenes that are in The Deep and The Troop and continuously picking up his work. And as I started reading the novel, the first chapter aside, I kind of got it. I definitely saw the way that he writes these kind of quick-paced scenes. He really got the plot going right from the jump. And I did really appreciate that. I thought the first chapter of this novel was completely misplaced. It takes place, for some reason, towards the very end of the novel, which I guess is kind of like this idea of giving you a glimpse of what is to come. But I kind of felt like it gave too much away of what was going to happen right from the start. So there was like, I don't want to say like twists in this book, because they're kind of revealed in this first chapter, that I just think would have worked better being revealed over time and not told to us from literally the first part of the book. Another thing that I didn't love, and again, this really pertains to the first chapter because it doesn't really come back ever. The first chapter literally has our main character, Margaret, having a fictional conversation with Tony Soprano, and makes a lot of references to the TV show, The Sopranos. And I just thought that was really, really weird because it's not like Margaret's a huge Sopranos fan, and it's not like this really comes back. And so have your opening chapter just be this like weird conversation where Margaret's like in her mind kind of pretending to be Meadow Soprano, Tony's daughter, and having this conversation with Tony it was just bizarre. It was just like, okay, Nick Cutter, you're clearly a fan of The Sopranos, but what does this have anything to do at all with this story? And part of me kept thinking, maybe there's going to be like some like mob ties into this story, right? And this is before I realized it was like set in Toronto and not like a suburb of New York, which I'm not 100% sure why I thought it was like a suburb of New York. I think because they referenced like Niagara, so I was like, oh, like maybe we're in New York State. I don't know. But it's got nothing to do with that. It's just kind of there, and it was weird. And then it tells us so much stuff about what happens with, what's his name, Alan Teller, and a little bit about Harry, and a little bit about Charity as well. And I just didn't think it was necessary. I felt like that whole chapter could have cut the Tony Soprano stuff and then just put itself chronologically in this narrative, and it would have been fine. And I feel like the twists would have been even more interesting because all the twists are revealed in the first couple of pages, so that kind of sucked. Yeah. And then we get into the actual story. So I took notes. I usually don't write notes on my reviews. When I do them, I usually just kind of do them. But I have notes here for today because I wanted to make sure I got everything down. And one of the first things that I noticed is I'm not quite sure what world these teenagers exist in, where like students can just like willingly skip like a month of school before graduation, and also that month of school conveniently happens to be in the middle of June. I went to school in America, so I don't know how it works in Canada, but like we were definitely out of school by like June 18th. We were not still actively going to school and going to classes, and like even if like we were having classes in June, we were having like midterms and finals, or we were having like finals. So I was very confused about the fact that it's set on like June 18th or something like that, and they're just still actively in the middle of school. So maybe that's a Canada thing. I don't know. That confused me greatly. But it really wanted to play off this concept of like cliche high school girl story. That was kind of the core root between Charity and Margaret's relationships. And I felt like Nick Cutter just didn't nail the voice of a teenage girl. I did not ever feel like Margaret was a believable teenage girl. Again, and he notes this in the back of the book, he's like, I'm in my late 40s and I'm writing, he's a man in his late 40s writing a teenage girl from 2018. My sister was 18 in 2018, so I just kind of kept comparing the way that Margaret spoke to the way my sister speaks, and it just didn't feel right. There was definitely a lot of moments where I was just like, like just a woman in general wouldn't react that way. And then there were these like moments where I was like, oh, I think Nick Cutter is really just like grasping for straws, trying to figure out how to characterize these teenagers. And he literally like references Mean Girls very subtly, like multiple times. My favorite was when he literally has Margaret describe like the cafeteria as like the watering hole. Like literally exactly the way that Katie Haring talks about like the fountain at like the mall in Mean Girls. And I was just like, I can't do it. Like this makes like, I'm literally reading Mean Girls references in this like body horror insect drama, and it was weird. And then all of a sudden we get all of these like Hannah Baker homages to like 13 Reasons Why, and he's writing literally like tapes, like recorded tapes of the 13 Reasons Why I'm doing this. And at the end of the novel he even says, yeah, I took a lot of influence from that. And it's like, yeah, you did, because I don't think he knew how to write teenage girls. He just took popular teenage girl stories and used that and put it in his novel. And then as well, and this isn't quite as blunt as the other two, and he does acknowledge that he did this in the back of his book, but then at the end of the day, the structure of the story is basically Carrie, except I just don't find this version of Carrie to be remotely sympathetic. And I will get into that more in my spoiler section. Our main characters are named Charity, who is our Carrie character, and Margaret, sometimes Maggie. However, their nicknames are Cherry and Plum. Charity is not Cherry. She is Plum. Margaret is Cherry. They love using the term chair to refer to that nickname's nickname. And that drove me crazy. Pick any other fruit. Peach, orange, lemon. If you guys are gonna be named after fruit, apple. Don't pick a fruit that is so similar to the other character's name. It was driving me crazy, and I was just like, why would you choose this? You're an author. It's not like these are just, it was not like these were like names that you actually had to work with. You chose these names. You chose these names. Oh, and it just drove me crazy. Oh, it drove me so crazy. And then we just have the fact that neither Charity nor Margaret ever felt fully fleshed out. We have so many flashbacks that Margaret shares with us and that Charity kind of gives us in voice recordings about their friendship, and none of it does anything for me to really further their relationships and who they are as characters. They're just these very one-note characters. In fact, the only character to me that had any depth at all was actually Harry. And Harry to me was the like true star of this story. And I loved how Nick Cutter had Margaret describe him kind of as like a rarity of like a good teenage boy, and then immediately is like, but he has a bad side to him, right? And they just reference the bad like daredevil side to him throughout the entire novel, and I was just like, why did you say that he was a good teenage boy? Just say that like he's Margaret's friend, and they like kind of like are like a romantic love interest. Like it's very cute. It's like teeny bopper love. Like I loved it. And I loved their relationship together, and I loved just everything about Harry supporting Margaret, and I thought it was fantastic and fun, and he was so cute and well developed and kept me interested in a large part of the story, because I really just found myself disliking reading about any of the other main characters. Because I just found myself really not liking any of the other main characters. And obviously we have Charity and Harry and Margaret as our three main on like the, I don't want to say the good side because they are like the one side of the story, because then we have Ridyard Crate. And Ridyard Crate is an interesting character because I understand why his extremely long backstory was needed and necessary. And I found that to be like a very unique way to give, like, I don't want to say like the villain origin story, but that's kind of what it was. And it gives a background as to why what is happening with Charity happens. And I thought that was very well done, and I thought it was needed for the structure of the story. However, then pulling Ridyard Crate in to actually be a main character felt completely unnecessary. I felt like the novel would have benefited much more if, like, we knew that story and then things went bad for Ridyard and he wasn't even able to get to Toronto to kind of chase down what was happening. I feel like had he just kind of disappeared and like been a victim of his own invention, the story would have been much more compelling, because he just kind of sat there to like serve all of the answers, and then when it finally came like his time to shine and like step up to the plate to do something, it became like barely an inconvenience, as Screen Rant would say, where it was just like he was there and then he was taken care of and that was it. And it was like, hello, why were you in this story? Apart from like the origins of things, like you were not needed. You were not needed. The story would have been fine if it was just the adventures of Harry and Margaret trying to solve this affair. We did not need all of the added information surrounding Harry and his surrounding Ridyard and his antics. It just didn't add anything that couldn't have been written in a document that somebody uncovers. Like it was bizarre. Okay, so I'm gonna say this one more thing before I really get into spoilers, but one of the things that I think made me really disillusioned with this novel is especially the first half, because it just kind of becomes fully absurdist afterwards. The first of the half of this novel is talking about a lot of like bizarre and crazy things. There's a lot of very like unsettling supernatural events that when we take a step back from, we look at and go, that could never happen in real life. And what lost me on this is I kept comparing this novel to the opening chapter of Chuck Palahniuk's Haunted. And if you haven't read Haunted, Haunted is a book I have never finished because it is so gross and so depraved. But that opening chapter is just filled with absurdist concepts and ideas and scenarios that could never, ever, 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 ever actually happen in real life. And yet, the way Chuck Palahniuk writes that story is so compelling and so entrancing that when you're reading it, your mind completely accepts that everything in it is realistic and could happen. And it is just such a way to captivate the reader into this absurdist story. And you just feel so icky reading it, and afterwards that story and the imagery just sticks with you, and there's nothing you can do that will ever get that imagery out of your head. Trust me, I've tried. I've had it in my brain for like 16 years. And it's just one of those things that it's just like, that impressed me so much, even though the story was so gross that I didn't want to finish the novel. And yet the entire time I was reading The Queen, I felt like Nick Cutter was trying to do that really edgy, gross out factor, but he wasn't writing it in a style where I felt I believed it. The whole time I was reading it, I was like, I don't see this ever actually happening. And that was what kind of ruined the atmosphere and the ambiance of this book for me, is I couldn't get behind what the plot was saying was happening. I just couldn't believe that it was real. And he just wasn't writing it in a style that made me give in to the suspension of disbelief. And so that really bothered me. So this ended up being a 3-star read. And the ending, I have a lot of issues with the ending, and I have a lot of issues with the big twist of Burning Van, which I'm really going to dive into on the spoiler side of this review. But what I really want to say about this is I don't like the message that this book sends by the end of it, because I don't necessarily know what the message was that this book is trying to send. And then on top of that, the only conclusion that I can make is that it's trying to make a female villain a sympathetic character. And even the way at the very end that Nick Cutter for some reason talks about like Florence Pugh and her activism, like weird thing to throw in there. It also has like Florence Pugh like supporting somebody who, it rhymes with grape, who sexually attacked and took advantage of multiple people purposefully. And I hated that. And I hated that message, and I hated how all of that transpires, and I just don't think that that was okay. So I'm going to expand on that now, and I'm going to put the spoilers in, because I really, really want to talk about this, and I'm trying to think of a way to do it in a way that YouTube will not flag this video. So yeah, I'm going to put my spoilers in now, because I think that this is something that like I really, really, really need to talk about. And I read a lot of reviews after I finished this book, not to get their opinions, but just to see if anybody else spoke about this, and I couldn't find any that did. I have a feeling they're definitely out there, and I just didn't see them, but spoilers are starting now. So let's talk about Burning Van. The whole first half of this novel talks about how there's this kind of event that happened at Burning Van where these 3 boys did something to Charity, and we are kind of led to believe that she herself was a victim, and that is what caused her to seemingly like run away. The book isn't quite sure what they want to do. Like, did Charity run away or did she get kidnapped? It kind of seems like she did run away from like how much humiliation she faced after like this like video gets uploaded to YouTube. But for some reason, Margaret just like assumes she's dead. So that was kind of like weird. But it also kind of makes sense as to why there are all of these like signs at school being like, bring our boys home. And Margaret's like, why doesn't it say anything about Charity? And it's like, well, it does kind of look like Charity ran away from embarrassment, you think. But then you find out that the rumor is actually that she was extorting these boys for money. And they just filmed her afterwards to protect themselves, right? And then it kind of goes through the rumor mill, and they're like, oh no, maybe they attacked her. And that's kind of what you think Margaret is assuming. And then we find out what actually happened. Charity uses her new insect-like pheromones to assault these boys and make them do something that they don't want to do. And she does it the first time because she has a crush on Will and she wants him to notice her. He doesn't know who she is. That is what signs his death warrant. The popular kid doesn't know who she is. We then go to the next one, who, what was it? Was his name Chris? I don't remember. Or Chad, I think it was Chad. And she goes after him because he's rich. He's rich and he's popular, and she's poor. So then she attacks him. And then she goes after Alan Teller, because Alan Teller is popular and kind of an ass. And literally, so he's kind of like the bully. But the only person he ever really seems to bully is Margaret, and it's literally him just calling her, like, chunky, like, one time, and just kind of being annoying and rude, right? None of these characters directly seem to do anything to warrant the horrible fates that Charity deems upon them. And then she kind of owns the fact that she's totally cool with assault. And then we find out that she is now torturing these characters. She is also going to, we find out later, assault Margaret, her best friend, because I guess she kind of has some weird crush on Margaret. It's a kind of unclear, but she's also extremely jealous of Margaret for things that are out of her control. Margaret's family become millionaires, not because of the lottery, not because of luck, because of work and patenting an invention that her father worked hard to do. Justifiably moves them out of poverty, right? So Charity doesn't like that. Margaret then has a teacher who encourages her to pursue a writing career and get into a good college and have a trajectory and a plan to be something as she gets older. And Charity finds out about that and attacks her teacher. And again, uses her pheromones, and we can only assume assaults her teacher against his will. And then, because Margaret has a relationship with Harry, that even though Margaret didn't ditch Charity at Burning Van, Charity walked away on her own accord to find Will, she blames Margaret for having a boyfriend. And so then she takes Harry away from him. And she does all of these horrible things. Oh, and then she also kills her mom. And the mom one I did think made a little bit more sense for, like, the revenge story, because the mom was handing her back over to her, like, handlers every birthday. That one I think made a little bit more sense. But it was just so much senseless, like, violence and assault on these characters that didn't deserve it, only to have at the end this kind of idea of, like, we must sympathize with her, like, she did what she needed to do because she was bullied and she was put down and she was poor and the rich people made fun of her, and now she's gonna attack all of these random rich people at a gala because class wars. And I was like, what? How is that the message of this novel? Like, Margaret doesn't deserve this. Harry doesn't deserve this. Harry's an innocent bystander. By all accounts, like, he's done nothing. Her teacher, done nothing. The rich popular boys all seemed much nicer than the girls. And the one thing that they did was they did videotape her coming out of that van, but once you realize what happened to them, you're kind of like, oh, maybe that was for their own assurance to prove that they were not the ones who attacked her. It was the other way around. How is that the message of this book? Oh my god. Okay. And so it just pissed me off. It pissed me off. I found, like, the insect visuals to be a little confusing. Like, where did all of the wasps come from? How was she growing them? Like, what was the Serena thing? Like, there was a lot of, like, bits and pieces that I didn't quite understand. Like, Serena's out there wearing the skin suit of Charity, but looks completely different. That didn't make sense to me. But she also still kind of looks human and passable when she does, like, that didn't make sense. And that was just, like, logistically, I didn't get it. And then I don't know what the ending of this novel was. Like, it just kind of, like, ends with Margaret escaping and, like, the Alan Teller thing kind of, like, following her, and I guess they were both put in like a quarantine lab, and eventually she escapes, and then for some reason we have like 20 pages of articles, and all of these articles were so freaking bizarre, and I was just like, why? Like, I don't need to read like a wannabe Vanity Fair article on this at all. Just write an epilogue, you know? It was so strange, and like, I didn't go for it. I didn't get it. I didn't love the ending. And I just feel so bad for Harry. Like, he so didn't deserve it, and what happened to him is so awful. And then the conclusion of the book is just like, well, there's this big hole in Canada with these insect creatures, and like, we stream a live feed, and we don't really know what to do about it, but like, keep on keeping on. Like, what? What was this ending? And then we have Ridyard. Ridyard does all of this stuff. He's like kind of like built up to be a main character, and he literally gets to the ballroom at the Hunt and Fish Club, and they're just like, nope, dead. Why was he there? What was the point of having him? He had no point in the second half. Oh, it was so bizarre. Anyway, it was a 3-star read for me because I didn't hate the writing style. I didn't want to put the book down. I did consistently read it to kind of continue to figure out this like absurdist story. And I really did want to give Nick Cutter a chance. So it wasn't a 2-star read because I didn't hate it. I really hate the messaging at the end. I don't know if I would read more from Nick Cutter. I really don't, because I'm just still scratching my head on this one. But it's a book. It's a book. And it's definitely an interesting read. Sound down on the comments below if like this is the vibe of like the troop and the deep, because I am really, I can't wrap my head around this book. I really, really can't. Oh my god, these characters were just so flat too. Just, I can go on and on and on. I have so many notes on this book, but I'm gonna leave it at that for now. 3-star read. I didn't hate this book by any means. I really didn't, but I didn't love the messaging. I didn't love the overall tone. And I really did not like the second half compared to the first half, where it was just kind of this unwinding 13 reasons why adjacent mystery with a lot of gross out bug factors that just didn't quite sell me on being realistic. So there you have it. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. And if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah. Bye.